Derek Scott doesn't have to say anything. He says plenty during baseball and basketball season, and he joins us now. Hey, buddy.
Good morning.
Morning.
Boy, so
hey, before we go any further, before you dive in too far,
yeah,
I am so pleased to hear that I'm going before Toman and not after Toman because I don't want to try and follow Big Jim.
No.
And not to mention, I don't know that the FCC has anything in the way of coverage supervision of podcasts, but if they don't, they might after that.
Believe me,
it's like having to go on after a multi-platinum selling artist, right? Yep. You're just like, exactly. No.
I've been running the gamut on this all week going, all right, okay, how do we do this and not get in trouble? But, Kornblut has him on every week.
Well, if that's true, then never mind. Then it's all – because Phil most assuredly has to worry about the FCC.
Right.
So you're in the clear.
I'm in the clear. I'm not at ESPN anymore, Derek. I don't have to worry about all that stuff. You get all kinds of stuff when you work for those guys. You're like, what? We're good, man. We're good. Hey, he can't be worse than Garcia.
True.
I don't think. Maybe.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But in addition to Derek calling basketball and baseball games, of course, Derek, you're very busy in your day job right now with all the state championship stuff going on. So we're very thankful that you've carved out a few minutes for us. Thank you for that, man.
You got it. Happy to do it.
All right. We'll start with, I don't want to call it the bad, but it is, but the not so good. And then we'll get to the better. How about that? Carolina basketball, of course, the other night really they didn't take it on the chin, more like got punched in the mouth, I think, is kind of what happened. They haven't played well away from home all year long. Derek, after games like that, generally coaches, there's not much to say. Hey, you got your rear ends kicked, you got your ass beat. Let's just get back on the saddle. One of the things we've been talking about, though, this week, Derek, is the fact that there are a couple of teams who are trying to get into the postseason who are right there, right? The Arkansas Razorbacks come to mind. They are now 6-9 in the league. They just beat Missouri. They just beat Texas. And their next trip is to Columbia this weekend. And then after that, South Carolina, they've got Georgia. Georgia, of course, just upset Florida. They're trying to get into the tournament. So if you're the Gamecocks right now, in addition to, hey, let's try to play our best basketball at the right time of the year, regardless of what's happened, you also can play some spoiler potential. Some of these teams. Have you heard any of that around the program?
No, but I think we all think that way. You should not need more motivation than just trying to win games. You should. And there's no reason to feel like when you are limited as you are and how many games you have left in the season that you should need something extra to get you ready to play. But if that is required, if you do need it, then look at it that way. But that's the one thing I took from Lamont's post-game interview. You mentioned it kind of briefly there. I think he's a little disappointed in pride, a willingness to not just sit there and take it when someone is basically slapping you around. I'm not saying you look for someone to go through and take a cheap shot or punch anybody, but what went down on Tuesday night was bothersome to me in that regard. There seemed to be a little too much acceptance of that beating. And, Missouri, God, give them credit. That bunch was phenomenal offensively, and they have been most of the season. But, yeah, there was some stuff there that just was disappointing, I think, to say the least, that guys didn't seem to be any more, bothered by what was being done to them than they were. And so let's all just hope and have expectations that that's not the case when you're back at home, because as you mentioned, home versus road, the splits for this team are just bananas in SEC play. You're the last 5 home games, the point difference between the Gamecocks and their opponents is 2 points over 5 games. On the road, it's well over 100 now. And so how do you even kind of make sense of that? But that is where they are. The next 2 are at home. So you just focus on that and say, well, let's just keep doing what we've been doing at home, and we should absolutely be able to be competitive against Arkansas and Georgia, and be able to beat both of them, just like you did Texas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, shot 45 free throws in that game. Plenty of whistles for you to call, Derek.
Yeah,
it was there was a lot of them. Yeah, the one bright spot clearly is Colin Murray-Boyles. If there's any conversation that you can have pertaining to the future of this program with the current roster, that's it. This guy, you talk to some folks, Derek, and I'm sure you've probably had some conversations here and there with all kinds of people. There are some that think, I don't know, maybe it's better if CMB, because of NIL, returns to college basketball and continues to kind of improve his game, his jump shot and outside and all kinds of things. He's been really aggressive lately. He's amazing around the basket. Then there, of course, there's some people that say he's a first-round talent. There's no question. Is he, quote, NBA ready? Maybe not, but he's a first-round talent, so he needs to take the money and go. And obviously the future of the program probably will have a lot to do with whatever that decision is. But in addition to that, you mentioned the splits, the home and the away splits. You go back to last year, Carolina was pretty darn good on the road. Places like Tennessee where they went and won. Besides talent, is it leadership? Is it just everybody else has gotten so much better? I mean, is there one thing that weighs more than the other?
I don't know about more than the other. You just came up with a couple of pretty good options, though, because, yes, the league's insane. I mean, we've talked about this for a while now. There's no getting away from the fact that the league is so loaded. But then the other part is there's no question. There's not leadership on this team from within the roster that you need. It just hasn't materialized this year. The older guys aren't vocal. Younger guys, typically that's not what they're comfortable doing. So you just don't have it. You don't have anybody who's going to stand up when something like Tuesday's going on and put a boot in somebody's butt about it. That's not how this team, unfortunately, is made up this year. The adversity is not met with a bit of resistance like it should be from one person to be able to say that's not happening here. We're not going down like that. So again, and you're going to get plenty of that sort of adversity in a league that's this loaded. So, I mean, if you're into the whole net ranking and you quad 1, quad 2, over half of our games now are quad 1 games. To say you're 28 games into your schedule and you played 15 quad 1 games, that's a rough ride right there, especially when you turn around and look at, just because it's the most obvious one for us to look at, is Clemson having a great season, but I think they played 6. I mean, it's a crazy comparison when you're saying, hey, they're in a legitimate league too. They have no resemblance to each other this year. ACC's got, I think, 9 teams now that are outside of the top 100. I mean, it is just abysmal league this year. And meanwhile, South Carolina's over here dealing with the best college basketball league arguably in the history of college basketball. It's nuts, but it is what it is. You can't change it. You're not the only one dealing with it. So you got to go out there and put up a better fight. And I think I think we're all anxious to see if they do that again this Saturday at home, because they've kept coming back at home. Even after some rough road trips, they've responded. So let's see if they're ready to do so again on Saturday, because Arkansas is playing much better, but they're also really thin right now. They're down Boogie Fland already, and that hasn't seemed to phase them, which kudos to Cal for keeping it together without their star point guard. But now probably the most consistent player this season for them has been Adu Thiro, and he missed last night's game, and I don't know he's out Saturday, but the speculation sounds like it's not necessarily a one-game thing. So you're catching them missing 2 of their best. Let's see if you can take advantage of it on your home floor again.
Yeah, I mentioned Arkansas beating Texas last night. If you just enjoy basketball, last night was kind of the night for you.
Yeah.
In the SEC, Arkansas 86-81 in overtime, and that was also on top of the fact that Texas scored 81. Trey Johnson scored half of those points. 39 points. 39 points last night in the ball game. Kentucky squeezed it out over Oklahoma on the road in Norman by 83-82, the final score there. And believe it or not, Oklahoma at 4-11 in the SEC is still knocking on the door to get into the postseason. And then the upset happened in College Station. Vanderbilt 86-84 over the Aggies on their home floor. And that's where I'm going with this, because last year, Vanderbilt and Missouri, Derek, when Carolina had their great year in year 2 under Lamont Paris, Vanderbilt and Missouri were a combined 4-32 in the league. Yep. They are a combined 17-13 this year. That is how quickly it can now change in the sport of college basketball. It can change overnight. Yep. And, for fans, it's not the 3 and 4 year rebuild that you're used to anymore. It's really what just happens in one offseason, and just like that, the flip of a switch, and there you go.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. That's the new game. And you've watched it. It's not just happening in one place or a few places. I mean, you look at what Pat Kelsey's done at Louisville.
Yeah.
With that program was in absolute disarray the last years. It's ironic. I'm looking at Kenny Payne's photo on the Arkansas roster page next to my laptop and thinking, man, how did you mess that up that bad that quickly? But how did Pat Kelsey come in and fix it that quickly? Well, part of that's the ACC's mediocre, but part of that also is he completely rebuilt the roster, had NIL dollars to go out and really compete for some frontline guys, and they are going to be an NCAA tournament team this year. So It happens in a lot of places, and it happens quickly. You just got to be able to, you got to be able to play the game. You got to be able to do it like other people are doing it with NIL. Because if you're not able to compete for the best guys in the portal, you're not going to be able to turn it quickly. And that's the reality of it. And then how much that changes next year, who knows? If the House, settlement comes through and the dollars are dispersed differently, and the NCAA says we're not going to allow pay to play anymore, and the NIL money coming from outside your program has to be legitimate. There has to be some return on what you're giving these guys besides basketball. I mean, who knows how much it changes? I mean, if you're St. John's, think about this. If you're St. John's right now, Rick Pitino's done amazing work, but Mike Repol's done amazing work too. Mike Repol is the millionaire billionaire who provides them all their NIL. Right. Well, Mike Repol's wealth came from companies he owned that he has since sold to other larger corporations. So if you're going to try and use Mike Repol's money next year under the new rules, how? If you can't have pay to play, what's Mike Repol's method of giving money to St. John's that they can use on players if the players aren't doing something in return? What would you market for Mike Repol if he doesn't have an active company anymore? If he's just a rich guy who used to own this and used to own that, how do you make it work? So that's why I'm saying I'm real curious if Delaware gets involved in this, like the NCAA says they're going to, if somehow the lawyers don't destroy this like they've destroyed everything else the NCAA's come up with for the past decade, how's that work? Because those teams without football, like St. John's, they're not going to have that rev share money that they can count on to replace old school NIL. I don't know. I just think that's an interesting side note. It has nothing to do with the Gamecocks, but it's just something I've been thinking about a little lately when I see what Rick's done at St. John's.
That is interesting, because then rev share could actually be the death of mid-major basketballs.
Yeah, well, Portal's done a lot to kill it.
Is already killing it, right? That could be the death knell, right?
Major leagues, but man, and I mean, hey, when you benefit from taking some of their guys, you can't sit here and say, "Oh, poor them." You're doing it to them.
Yeah.
But it's changed the equation. And not that St. John's is a mid-major, it's just in a league that doesn't have football. But the true mid-majors of the world, it's a hard road to climb now, for sure.
It sounds to me like Mike Repol is going to be opening an LLC soon. He's going to have a car dealership or something.
Exactly. The smart thing to do is create a 501c3, right? And then, that way you're doing good in the community. And look, the basketball players are doing good in the community.
Mike didn't get where he is in life by being a dummy. So I'm guessing I'm not going to tell him anything he hasn't been thinking about already.
No, right.
He's coming up with a solution. There's no doubt. There's no doubt. Yeah. The ACC, it's remarkable what's happened in that league. But there is one undefeated team in the ACC this year, and that is the South Carolina Gamecocks. They would win that league. At least we know that. Derek, I know we don't have you for very long, so certainly want to turn our attention to what's coming tomorrow. It's the best rivalry in the country, Carolina and Clemson. You know all about it, as you've been calling the games for a while. I guess Saturday you won't be able to call that one because you'll be with basketball, but you will be there tomorrow night, right? At
Yes,
Doug Kingsman. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, this is so Becker's moving up, McCoy's moving up, and I think it's pretty likely we'll get SQ on Sunday. It seems, from what I understand, like it's looking pretty good here. You know, this rivalry never determines what's going to happen with the rest of your season, but my goodness, is important. And Derek, I have seen two polar opposite approaches this week from these coaches. One of them says they've got banners hanging all over the locker room, and they have Gamecock runs, and they talk about it on day one. And you know, he probably doesn't see himself having a friendship with the South Carolina coach. The other one is like, man, this is the best rivalry. I'm happy to be a part of it. We're going to go out there and do everything we can, much like Ray Tanner used to say, and win this thing. And but you know what? At the end of the day, if we sweep or get swept or split or whatever, we still got to play 40-plus baseball games. So we're going to get to the next day. Whew. You can't handle it any different than that. If you ask me.
Paul Maneri yesterday was channeling his inner Steve Spurrier and kind of looking around going, man, you guys sure do get all wound up about one team here, don't you? I mean, we're trying to win the SEC. We're trying to win the national championship. But okay, I mean, this is how you feel. And meanwhile, Eric Bakich is channeling his inner Jack Leggett. Where he's just obsessing over this thing and has his guys thinking about it nonstop. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you one way is right, one way is wrong. It's just very, very different approaches to this series coming up this weekend. People will be curious to see how those teams respond to their coaches. You can motivate a lot of different ways. They might both be effective ways to motivate guys. It is, though, a pretty polar opposite approach to the weekend.
It is. You know, we talked to Monty yesterday, and Phil, I mentioned this to Phil. You can't say it any better than what Monty Lee said yesterday right here. He said, it's about the players, man. It's about the players. You know, they're going to go out there, they're going to win, and they're going to lose. It has always been about the players. I think that's certainly the right approach here. This baseball team, Derek, they're not. Well, I think they are leading the country in a couple of things like hard hit balls and stuff like that. But you know, when you look at rankings and all this, it's too early for all that. But when you look at it and you look at where numbers are and stuff, you know, they haven't hit 30 balls out of the yard. They don't have a minuscule 0.5 earned run average through 9 games or anything like that. But I will contest that from day 1 to day 9, they have gotten much better, and he has gotten, I think, a very fair look at his best players and at his bench players and his role players. I think through 9 games, curious to see your thoughts on this. I'm not so sure that Paul Maneri could know more about his team than the way he's managed it through these first 9.
The only way you could say he could know more is if you would have played a little higher caliber competition somewhere in those first 9. And I'm not saying you should have, because you've got the SEC looming and you've got Clemson. No, we don't need any more in terms of front line competition. But take that away, and yes, he's gotten a very good look at a lot of guys. And in circumstances, as he's pointed out a couple of times, when people have been fretting that we haven't been run ruling everyone in sight, nothing wrong with having guys have some pressure to win in close ball games and seeing how they respond to that. Even if the opponent on their side isn't one you necessarily expected to be in a ball game with you in the last 3 innings, if they are, then go out there and play and deal with the pressure, deal with the circumstances, and you'll be better for it. And he said he learned that when he was very young from his dad, who was a great coach too, and who told him basically to quit whining about not beating teams up that you thought you should beat up and focus on what you can gain from winning close games. And so he's kept that in his repertoire, and he's seen enough of it first couple of weeks to feel like, yeah, we got some value in that, especially probably from your pitchers, how they handle protecting close game leads late in contests. And no, I'm with you. He's gotten a very good look at a lot of different guys, and that's going to be valuable. And now we see, you know, how they respond to a road environment, because this will be the first time they'll do that. I don't care what sport you're in. It's a different game when you're playing in somebody else's building and the fans are going against you. How do you handle that? And then how do you handle level of pitching talent that is a pretty significant step up from what you've been looking at through the first 9?
Yeah, and Clemson certainly has had their issues from time to time thus far this year too. Probably played a little bit more difficult of a schedule so far, but they certainly got some things that they need to get figured out as well. Matthew Becker will get this final question. We'll get you out of here so you can go to work. Matthew Becker will get the ball tomorrow night. He's a lefty. He's a senior. He's from this state. He knows all about this rivalry. Your thoughts on what you expect to see from him?
Well, he's been there. He's pitched in this rivalry, obviously. He's pitched at Clemson, if I'm not mistaken. So that's good because that is going to be the question. What we've seen from Matthew so far this year looks like a maturity level that maybe at times had been missing in the past, and he's handled situations better. This will be a real test to see, okay, how do you handle this situation? Because, again, they're going to get after you. They're going to be chirping both in the dugout and in the stands. Can you stay focused, pitch to pitch? He's talked about how Terry Rooney's worked with him just on his breathing and, keeping your focus on the mound and on what you need to do. Can he apply that for the first time to a really challenging atmosphere and circumstance? How does he deal with that? I'm really anxious to see it. He's good enough to go beat these guys. I don't have any doubt about that. But how do you deal with the other stuff, the potential distractions that are out there when you're playing at Doug Kingsmore Stadium?
They will certainly try to get under his skin. That is that's a guarantee, not just the fans.
Right.
Derek, cannot wait for 6:45 tomorrow night when you and Stu will cut the mics on and get us primed and ready to go. Again, this is the best rivalry in the country, and you've got the best seat in the house. I think. Is the booth okay at Clemson? They treat you okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
All
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Only thing about that I don't love is that the back row of the fans is right in front of you. So sometimes if you don't have a good effects feed and you're trying to just have a crowd mic out the window, you get more conversations from row 30 than you get game noise, and that's not great. So you really just hope that they're going to give you a good effects feed, and they usually do take care of us up there. They really do. They do a great job. And Brian Hennessy in the media relations staff, he's top shelf, and his mom's brownies are beyond top shelf.
That's
so
right.
Yeah, there's lots of goodness that's going to come out of the trip.
Do you get those tomorrow night? He'll have. Oh yeah, that's great. Yeah, Brian's really, 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 really good at what he does. He's a class act. There's no question about that. Well, at least you don't have to Harry Doyle it. Somebody just give me something. Anybody. Derek, it's always a pleasure to have you on, my friend. Safe travels to the upstate, and go get them.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, buddy. There you go. The great voice of Carolina baseball, Derek Scott. We're lucky to have him. There's no doubt about it. He makes it fun.